The crowd fell silent as the auction block creaked beneath Fiona Linden's trembling feet, her protruding belly visible even beneath the threadbare dress that hung from her slender shoulders. Dust swirled in the scorching New Mexico sun of 1873 as the auctioneer's voice rang out across the makeshift platform erected in the center of Redemption Creek. "What do we have here, gentlemen? A fine, healthy woman, 20 years of age. Comes with an extra mouth to feed in about 2 months' time," the auctioneer announced, his voice dripping with disdain as he gestured toward Fiona's swollen abdomen. "Can cook, clean, and sew. Starting bid is $30. Fiona's green eyes darted frantically across the sea of weathered faces before her. Men in dusty hats and worn boots exchanged glances, some with pity, others with something far more sinister in their gazes. Her hands instinctively moved to protect her unborn child, the only family she had left after her husband's death in a mining accident 3 months prior. The crowd's murmurs grew as the auctioneer continued his pitch. "Come now, gentlemen. Surely someone could use an extra pair of hands around their homestead." Even with the complication, from the back of the crowd, a tall figure pushed forward. His spurs jingled with each determined step, the sound cutting through the uncomfortable silence that had settled over the gathering. As he reached the front, he removed his wide-brimmed hat, revealing sun-weathered features and piercing blue eyes that locked onto Fiona's terrified gaze. "I'll take her and the baby too," he called out, his voice steady and clear. $50. The auctioneer's eyebrows shot up. $50 for the pregnant widow. Sold to Mr. Xavier Archer, the cowboy replied, already reaching into his vest pocket for the money. "And the lady will be riding in my wagon, not walking behind it." Fiona couldn't believe what she was hearing. After her husband's death and the subsequent seizure of their small homestead for unpaid debts, she had expected the worst. Being sold to the highest bidder had seemed the final insult, but this stranger's unexpected kindness sparked a dangerous flicker of hope in her heart. As Xavier led her away from the auction block with a gentle hand at her elbow, whispers followed them through the dusty street. "That's Xavier Archer, owns the Double Circle Ranch north of town. Heard he lost his wife in childbirth 2 years back. Never remarried. What's he want with another man's pregnant widow?" Fiona kept her eyes downcast, her cheeks burning with shame as Xavier helped her into a modest wagon at the edge of town. He climbed up beside her, taking the reins and clicking to the horses without a word. They traveled in silence for nearly an hour, the town of Redemption Creek shrinking behind them as they followed a winding dirt road toward the distant mountains. Fiona's hands twisted nervously in her lap, her mind racing with possibilities, some hopeful, some terrifying. Finally, she gathered her courage. "Mr. Archer, Xavier," he corrected without looking at her. "Xavier," she repeated softly. "I feel I should know what expectations you have of me." Her voice faltered slightly. "What I am to be to you." Xavier's hands tightened on the reins momentarily before he sighed, his shoulders relaxing. "Mrs. Linden, Fiona, please." A slight smile touched his lips. "Fiona, I expect you to rest until that baby comes. After that, if you're willing, I could use help with the cooking and keeping house. I've got 3 ranch hands who eat like wolves, and I'm a terrible cook." Fiona studied his profile, confusion evident in her expression. "That's all, but you paid $50. Xavier finally turned to look at her, his blue eyes softening. "I paid $50 because no woman should be sold like cattle, especially not one in your condition." He returned his attention to the road. "My sister was widowed while carrying her first child. No one helped her." His jaw tightened at the memory. "I swore if I ever had the chance to help someone in similar circumstances, I would." Tears welled in Fiona's eyes. After months of hardship and desperation, such simple kindness felt overwhelming. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Don't thank me yet," Xavier warned, though his tone remained gentle. "Ranch life isn't easy, even in the best circumstances." As they crested a hill, a sprawling ranch came into view in the valley below. A modest but well-maintained two-story house stood at the center, surrounded by corrals, a barn, and bunkhouses. Cattle dotted the distant pastures, and smoke curled from the main house's chimney. "Welcome to Double Circle Ranch," Xavier said, a note of pride in his voice. Fiona took in the sight with wide eyes. After the cramped mining cabin she'd shared with her late husband, the ranch seemed enormous. "It's beautiful," she breathed. Xavier's expression softened. "It's home." As they approached the main house, a tall, thin woman with gray, streaked hair emerged onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyebrows rose as she noted Fiona's condition. "Martha," Xavier called as he brought the wagon to a stop. "We have a guest who will be staying with us for a while." "This is Mrs. Fiona Linden." Martha's shrewd eyes took in Fiona's state, then Xavier's determined expression, and something like approval flickered across her weathered features. "About time this house had a woman's touch again," she said briskly. "Come along, Mrs. Linden. You look dead on your feet." Xavier helped Fiona down from the wagon, his strong hands gentle on her waist. "Martha's been our housekeeper for 15 years, he explained. "She'll show you to your room. I need to check on the herd, but I'll be back for supper." Before Fiona could respond, Martha had already ushered her toward the house, clucking sympathetically. "Lord above, girl, you're thin as a rail except for that belly. When's the little one due?" "About 7 weeks, the midwife thought," Fiona replied, allowing herself to be guided into the cool interior of the house. Martha nodded decisively. "Plenty of time to get some meat on your bones, then. Xavier mentioned you might help with cooking once you're up to it, but for now, you just rest. Doctor from town comes by every other Tuesday. He'll be here tomorrow, as luck would have it." Fiona's head swam with the sudden change in her circumstances. Just hours ago, she had been standing on an auction block, her future bleaker than she could bear to contemplate. Now she was being shown to a clean, comfortable bedroom in a proper ranch house, treated with kindness and dignity she had not expected to experience again. "Why is he doing this?" she asked Martha suddenly. "He doesn't know me." Martha paused in the doorway, her expression softening. "Xavier Archer is a good man who's seen his share of sorrow. His wife, Caroline, died bringing their son into the world, and the child followed her hours later." She sighed heavily. "Some men get bitter. Xavier got kinder. Now you rest. I'll bring up some tea." Alone in the room, Fiona sank onto the bed, one hand resting protectively over her unborn child. "We might be all right after all, little one," she whispered, daring to hope for the first time in months. Over the following weeks, Fiona found herself settling into life at the Double Circle Ranch. True to his word, Xavier expected nothing from her except to rest and regain her strength. The ranch hands Jose, Caleb, and old Tobias treated her with respectful distance, though Jose's wife Maria quickly became a friend, visiting from their small house at the edge of the property to keep Fiona company. As her strength returned, Fiona grew restless with inactivity. One morning, Xavier found her in the kitchen, flour dusting her hands as she worked alongside Martha. "Should you be on your feet?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Fiona smiled, more confidently than she had in months. "The baby isn't due for at least 3 more weeks, and I'm feeling stronger every day. Besides, I can't let Martha do everything herself forever." Xavier's gaze lingered on her face, noting the healthy flush in her cheeks that had replaced the pallor of their first meeting. "Just don't overdo it," he said finally, reaching for his hat. "I'll be checking the north pasture today. We lost some calves to wolves last week." "Be careful," Fiona called after him, surprising herself with the genuine concern in her voice. Martha gave her a knowing look. "That man needs someone worrying after him," she said approvingly. "Been too long on his own." Fiona blushed, turning back to the bread dough. "He's been very kind to me, that's all." "MMHMM," Martha hummed, unconvinced. "And you've been good for him too." "First time I've seen him smile regularly since Caroline passed." The mention of Xavier's late wife sent an uncomfortable pang through Fiona's chest. "Tell me about her," she requested quietly. "What was she like?" Martha's hand stilled as she considered the question. Caroline was a town girl. Beautiful, educated, came from money back east. Her father owned the bank in Redemption Creek. She sighed. She tried hard to adapt to ranch life, but it never quite suited her. Still, she and Xavier were devoted to each other. Fiona nodded, trying to picture the refined woman who had been Xavier's wife. The opposite of herself, a miner's daughter who had married a miner, accustomed to hard work and simple living. He must miss her terribly. He did, for a long time, Martha agreed. But lately, I think he's finally looking forward instead of back. That evening, Fiona waited up for Xavier's return, a strange restlessness preventing her from retiring early as usual. When the door finally opened well after sunset, she rose from her chair by the fire, alarmed by his exhausted appearance. "Xavier, are you all right?" He looked surprised to see her still awake. "Fine, just tired. Lost track of a stray calf and had to go further than expected." He rubbed a hand across his stubbled jaw. "You should be resting." "I've rested enough," Fiona replied firmly, guiding him to the chair she had vacated. "Sit. I'll bring you some stew." Martha kept it warm. Too tired to argue, Xavier sank into the chair while Fiona bustled to the kitchen. When she returned with a steaming bowl and fresh bread, he accepted it with a grateful nod. "Thank you," he said quietly, his eyes meeting hers. "It's been a long while since someone waited up for me." Fiona settled carefully into the chair opposite him, one hand absently stroking her belly as the baby kicked. "I wanted to thank you properly," she said, "for everything you've done for us." Xavier's expression softened as he noticed her gesture. "May I?" he asked hesitantly, gesturing toward her abdomen. Surprised, Fiona nodded, taking his calloused hand and placing it where the baby was most active. Xavier's eyes widened as he felt the strong kicks against his palm. "Strong little one," he murmured, something like longing flashing across his features before he withdrew his hand. "I'm scared," Fiona admitted suddenly, the words spilling out before she could reconsider. "My mother died giving birth to my youngest sister. I'm afraid of leaving my baby alone in the world." Xavier's expression grew serious. "That won't happen," he said with quiet certainty. "Dr. Winters is the best in the territory, and Martha delivered half the children in the county before he arrived. You won't be alone." The conviction in his voice comforted her more than she expected. "And after?" she asked, voicing the question that had been growing in her mind. "What happens after the baby comes?" Xavier considered her for a long moment. "That depends on what you want, Fiona. You're not a servant or an obligation. Once you're recovered, if you wish to move on, I'll help you get established wherever you choose. And if I wish to stay?" The question hung between them, loaded with unspoken possibilities. "Then you stay," Xavier replied simply, though something in his eyes suggested the answer meant more than his casual tone implied. 3 nights later, Fiona woke to sharp pain lancing through her abdomen. Gasping, she struggled to sit up, realizing with a mixture of terror and excitement that her time had come early but not dangerously so. "Martha," she called, her voice strained as another contraction gripped her. "Martha." Within moments, the housekeeper appeared in her doorway, taking in the situation with a single glance. "Breathe, child," she instructed calmly, moving to Fiona's bedside. "I'll send Jose for the doctor. Xavier," she called sharply down the hallway. Xavier appeared almost instantly, his hair rumpled from sleep but his eyes alert. "The baby," Martha nodded. "Go tell Jose to fetch Dr. Winters, then bring hot water and clean towels." Hours blurred together as Fiona labored, the pain intensifying with each passing contraction. Dr. Winters arrived just before dawn, his presence bringing a measure of relief to the anxious household. "You're doing fine, Mrs. Linden," he assured her after his examination. "The baby is positioned correctly, and you're progressing well." Outside her door, Xavier paced relentlessly, wincing at each muffled cry from within. The memories of another birth, another cry suddenly silenced, threatened to overwhelm him. "She's stronger than Caroline was," Martha told him quietly, emerging briefly to refresh the hot water. "And the baby isn't breech. Have faith." As the sun climbed higher in the morning sky, a different cry finally pierced the tense silence, the indignant wail of a newborn taking its first breath. Xavier froze mid-step, his heart hammering as he waited. Minutes later, Dr. Winters opened the door, his tired face breaking into a smile. "Mother and daughter are doing just fine, Mr. Archer. You can come in now." Xavier entered the room hesitantly, his gaze immediately drawn to Fiona. Exhausted but radiant, she cradled a tiny bundle against her chest, looking up at him with tear-filled eyes. "Xavier," she said softly, "meet Alina Grace Linden." He approached slowly, as if afraid they might disappear if he moved too quickly. When Fiona tilted the bundle toward him, he caught his first glimpse of the tiny pink face nestled in the blankets. "She's perfect," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "Would you like to hold her?" Startled, Xavier began to shake his head, but Fiona was already extending the precious bundle toward him. With trembling hands, he accepted the infant, cradling her with unexpected confidence. "Hello, Alina," he murmured, gently touching one finger to her miniature hand. To his amazement, the baby's fingers curled reflexively around his, and something in his chest that had been frozen for 2 years began to thaw. Dr. Winters cleared his throat. "Mrs. Linden needs rest now, but everything looks excellent. I'll return in 3 days to check on them both." Xavier reluctantly returned the baby to Fiona's arms, stepping back as Martha shooed him from the room. "Let them rest," she instructed firmly. "You can visit again later." In the following days, Xavier found himself drawn repeatedly to Fiona's room, watching in wonder as she nursed and cared for little Alina. His ranch duties still called him away during daylight hours, but each evening he would sit with them, sometimes talking softly about his day, other times simply providing quiet company. One evening, as Fiona gently rocked Alina to sleep, she glanced up to find Xavier watching them with an expression that made her heart flutter strangely. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. Xavier seemed to debate his answer before responding. "I'm thinking that for the first time in a long while this house feels like a home again." Fiona's cheeks warmed at his words. "Because of Alina. Because of both of you," he admitted, his gaze steady on hers. "Fiona, I know it's too soon. You're still recovering, still grieving your husband perhaps, but I want you to know that I hope you'll consider staying, not as my housekeeper or guest, but—" "As what?" Fiona prompted when he hesitated. Xavier took a deep breath. "As my wife eventually, if you could ever see me that way." Fiona's eyes widened. "Xavier, I don't answer now," he said quickly. "Just think about it. I know it's not romantic, we barely know each other, but I care for you, Fiona, and I already love Alina as if she were my own." The sincerity in his voice brought tears to Fiona's eyes. "My husband was a good man," she said quietly, "but our marriage was one of convenience and shared circumstances. We were fond of each other, but—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I've felt more in these few weeks with you than in years with him. It confuses me." Hope flickered in Xavier's expression. "Then perhaps with time—" "Perhaps," Fiona agreed softly. "With time." Spring blossomed into summer, and Alina thrived under the loving care of her mother and the entire double-circle household. Xavier proved to be an adoring father figure, often carrying the baby in a sling across his chest as he performed the less dangerous ranch duties, speaking to her constantly about the animals, the land, and the sky above. Fiona watched their bond grow with a mixture of joy and uncertainty. Her feelings for Xavier deepened with each passing day, but she hesitated to acknowledge them fully, afraid of rushing into a new attachment so soon after becoming a widow. Everything changed on a sweltering July afternoon. Fiona had taken Alina outside to catch the rare breeze, settling under the shade of a large oak tree near the house. As she gently fanned her drowsy daughter, the sound of approaching hoofbeats drew her attention. 3 riders appeared on the horizon, moving fast toward the ranch house. Something about their approach set alarm bells ringing in Fiona's mind, and she gathered Alina close, rising to her feet. "Martha," she called urgently toward the house. "Martha, something's wrong." The housekeeper emerged onto the porch just as the riders thundered into the yard, dust billowing around their horses. Fiona recognized the leader immediately: Samuel Burke, the debt collector who had seized her husband's claim after his death. "Well, well," Burke drawled, his cold eyes fixing on Fiona. "If it isn't the widow Linden, fancy finding you here." Fiona instinctively backed toward the house, clutching Alina protectively. "What do you want, Mr. Burke?" Burke swung down from his horse, adjusting his gun belt as he approached. "Seems there was a miscommunication about your husband's debts, Mrs. Linden. The bank discovered additional loans that weren't settled by the sale of your property." His thin lips curved into an unpleasant smile. "I've come to collect." Martha moved swiftly to Fiona's side. "Mr. Archer isn't here," she said firmly. "You'll need to return when he is." "Oh, I think the widow can handle her own affairs," Burke replied, his gaze never leaving Fiona. "Unless, of course, she's found herself a new protector." Fiona lifted her chin defiantly. "Whatever debts my husband owed died with him. You took our home and everything in it. There's nothing more to collect." Burke's expression hardened. "The law says otherwise, Mrs. Linden, and I always get what I'm owed." He took another step forward. "Now, we can do this pleasantly, or you can get back on your horse and leave my property." Xavier's voice cut through the tension as he rode into the yard, his rifle resting across his saddle. Caleb and Jose flanked him, both similarly armed. Relief flooded through Fiona at Xavier's timely arrival. Burke's men shifted nervously, hands hovering near their weapons as they assessed the newcomers. Xavier dismounted smoothly, passing his reins to Caleb before approaching Burke. His posture was relaxed, but Fiona could see the tension in his shoulders, the dangerous glint in his eyes. "Mrs. Linden and her daughter are under my protection," Xavier stated evenly. "Any business you have with her goes through me," Burke sneered. "What is she to you, Archer? Your whore? Or did you buy her out of pity at that auction?" Xavier moved so quickly that Burke had no time to react. In an instant, the debt collector found himself on his knees, Xavier's hand fisted in his collar, the barrel of a revolver pressed under his chin. "That's my future wife you're speaking of," Xavier growled, his voice low and dangerous. Apologize, now. Terror flashed across Burke's face. I apologize, Mrs. Linden, he stammered. Xavier released him with a disgusted shove. Now, what's this about additional debts? Burke scrambled to his feet, straightening his rumpled clothing with trembling hands. The bank found notes for another $300 borrowed against future earnings from the mine. With interest, that comes to $350. Xavier's eyes narrowed. Show me the paperwork. Reluctantly, Burke extracted a folded document from his jacket. Xavier examined it carefully before passing it to Fiona. Is that your husband's signature? Fiona studied the paper, then shook her head firmly. No, Thomas's handwriting was much rougher than this. He never learned proper penmanship. She pointed to specific letters. And he always made his tea differently. This is a forgery. Xavier turned back to Burke, whose face had paled considerably. Forging loan documents is a hanging offense, Burke. I wonder what Judge Patterson would make of this. Now, wait a minute, Burke protested, backing toward his horse. I was just following the bank's orders. If there's a mistake, the mistake, Xavier interrupted coldly, was coming after Mrs. Linden. You tell your employer that if anyone bothers her or her child again, I'll bring this forgery straight to the territorial governor. Am I clear? Burke nodded frantically, scrambling onto his horse. Crystal clear, Archer. He signaled to his men, and the three riders galloped away, dust trailing behind them. As they disappeared from sight, Fiona's knees weakened with delayed shock. Xavier was at her side instantly, one arm supporting her while the other gently cradled Alina. Are you all right? He asked, concern evident in his voice. Fiona nodded, tears welling in her eyes. You called me your future wife, she whispered. Xavier's expression softened. I meant it, Fiona, if you'll have me. Instead of answering with words, Fiona rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his in a gentle kiss. When she pulled back, Xavier's eyes were wide with surprise and dawning joy. Is that a yes? He asked hoarsely. Fiona smiled through her tears. It's a yes, Xavier Archer. For me and for Alina. They were married 2 weeks later by the traveling preacher who visited Redemption Creek monthly. The ceremony was small but joyful, held in the garden behind the main house where wildflowers bloomed in riotous color. Alina, dressed in a tiny white gown sewn by Martha, gurgled happily in Jose's wife's arms as her mother and new father exchanged vows. I never expected to find love again, Xavier told Fiona that night as they stood on the porch of their home, the stars brilliant overhead. Alina slept peacefully in her cradle inside, exhausted from the day's excitement. When I saw you on that auction block, I only meant to help. Fiona leaned into his embrace, her head resting against his chest. And I never expected to be grateful for that terrible day. But if it hadn't happened, I wouldn't have found you. Xavier tipped her face up to his. I promise you, Fiona Archer, that you and Alina will never want for anything as long as I live. No one will ever threaten you again. I know, she replied softly. But it's not your protection that made me love you, Xavier. It's your heart. Their lips met in a tender kiss, sealing promises that would carry them through the years to come. 5 years later, the Double Circle Ranch had prospered beyond Xavier's wildest expectations. The original herd had tripled in size, and the main house had been expanded to accommodate their growing family. Alina, now a spirited 5-year-old with her mother's green eyes and a wild mane of auburn curls, chased her 3-year-old brother Thomas through the garden while their father looked on with pride. Fiona joined Xavier on the porch, their infant daughter Lily sleeping against her shoulder. Penny for your thoughts, husband, she said, smiling as he automatically reached to take the baby from her arms. Xavier cradled his youngest child tenderly, marveling at how completely his life had transformed. "I was thinking about the day we met," he admitted. "How close I came to not going into town that day." Fiona slipped her arm around his waist, watching Alina teach Thomas how to twirl in circles until they both collapsed in giggling heaps on the grass. "Providence," she said simply. "Providence," Xavier agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. "And the best $50 I ever spent." Fiona laughed, the sound still capable of making his heart skip a beat after all these years. "I think you got more than you bargained for." Xavier looked from his wife to his children, remembering the lonely man he had been before they came into his life. "No," he said softly. "I got exactly what I needed, even when I didn't know to ask for it." As the sun set over the Double Circle Ranch, painting the sky in brilliant hues of gold and crimson, Xavier Archer gathered his family close, profoundly grateful for the day he had called out those life-changing words. "I'll take her and the baby too."